Okay, welcome, Marianne. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Are
Thanks
you
for having me
enjoying
on.
the snow coming down? Is there snow coming down where you are?
Actually, it's raining where I'm at.
Okay.
You know, I think I would prefer the snow. It's prettier and brighter.
Yeah, they are very big snowflakes coming down right now. So,
Oh, yeah, that's so
yeah.
peaceful and yeah,
It's the last day of February. What do you expect, right?
right. Well, I get to
Well,
see the dreary rain, so
yeah, that's par for course for where we live, right?
right.
Well, if you could maybe just let's start by you introducing yourself to the listeners.
Okay. Well, my name's Marianne Redis, and I I work for a nonprofit. I'm executive director for Elevations of Children's Therapy Resource Foundation. I've been working in nonprofits for quite a few years. And I worked with children with cancer for many years.
Okay.
And that's kind of my story. I have a lot of um, cancer in my background in my
Mhm.
family. And um, So I don't know if you want me to just jump right
Yeah.
into kind of the whole backstory, or I live in Spokane Valley. I like
Yeah.
walks on the beach, and those kind of things. But I can just jump right into kind of what has informed my life and got me to
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's do that.
Okay, so my first child was born in 1985, Nikki, little girl, and she was diagnosed with cancer when she was 16 months old.
Mm,
And at the time, I was pregnant with my second child, Michael.
mhm. Okay.
And so she went through 2 years of chemotherapy, and we came through that, came out on the other end.
Okay.
Michael was born in the middle of all of that.
Okay.
And then we just kind of moved on, right, with
Hmm.
life and um, things. And I got pregnant again, and my third child, Matthew, was born in 1989, just after Nikki finished her treatments.
Okay.
So, and it's so funny because when the kids come into our lives,
Hmm.
they bring such unique gifts.
Hmm.
And Michael brought this, Nikki, of course, was our first, and it's the joy of that first baby. And
Hmm.
Michael brought this beautiful spiritual connection of life is okay, life goes on.
Mm.
Matthew came in and he came out of the womb going, man, I'm here and we're going to have a good time.
Oh.
And it was kind of fun. So we
Hmm.
moved on a little bit. And then 3 years later, my husband was diagnosed with cancer,
Mm.
and he had a tumor in his upper leg, and he was a year into his treatments. And Nikki was 7, and she developed a secondary cancer
Oh, wow.
that was a result of the treatments of the first cancer,
Oh, wow.
which those are the papers you sign that you understand that there can
Oh,
be a secondary cancer as a result of the treatments. So that was very, very difficult.
yeah.
And so the two of them were in treatment together.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had 2 young boys. And when
Hmm.
I think back on that time,
Hmm.
how did I make it through that?
Yeah.
And I absolutely know I didn't do it alone.
Mm.
I had support. I had family around me. I had friends that helped. But I also knew I also had something that said, you can do this. So
Hmm.
there was this inner strength, and I had a pretty strong faith that this is going to you're going to get through this.
Hmm.
So Nikki had a bone marrow transplant, and her unfortunately she relapsed after it.
Mm.
And then in 1994, my husband passed away in
Oh,
April, on April 3rd. And at the time, Nikki had already relapsed.
hmm.
And so we knew that her diagnosis was now terminal.
Mm.
And there really wasn't anything, as she had had lifetime doses of chemotherapies,
Hmm.
lifetime doses of radiation. So we knew that she was terminal.
Hmm.
So here we are faced with grieving and loss of my husband
Mhm.
of the children's father,
Mhm.
and the knowledge that my daughter's death was imminent.
Mhm.
And I often say Nikki taught us how to live
Mhm.
because she only had so many days left. So what are we going to do with those days?
Mhm.
So we made the decision to, there was an experimental drug at the time that her oncologist said was a possibility.
Mhm.
But it was a phase 1 study, and phase 1 studies are where they're just testing levels of the drug. So it's like it's not necessarily curative
Okay.
or meant to be. It's
Yeah.
just that phase 1 to see, what level might be effective.
Mhm.
And Nikki was wise beyond her years. She was
Mhm.
9 years old at the time. And my husband was gone, and it
Mhm.
was her and I sitting in the oncologist's office.
Mhm.
And I looked at her and I said, Nikki, what do you want to do? You need to have a say in this. And she
Mhm.
said, Mom, I just want to be a kid.
Mm.
She had been denied so much.
Yeah.
She had been spent so much time in the hospital.
Yeah.
And when you go through a bone marrow transplant, your immune system is completely destroyed. So
Mm.
she couldn't go out into public. She couldn't go to movies. She couldn't go to school.
She
There were
couldn't
so
be a
many
kid.
things. Couldn't be a kid.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, that's what we're going to do. And so I said, what do you want to do first? And she wanted to go eat Chinese food in Chinatown. So I said,
Oh,
okay, we're going to San Francisco. And
okay.
we lived in Southern California at the time.
Okay. Okay.
So we went up to San Francisco, and my in-laws lived in San Francisco, and we went and we hiked in the redwoods, and
Mhm.
we ate Chinese food in Chinatown. We went to down to the pier. We just went and had an adventure,
Yeah.
and we had to coordinate, of course, with clinics and doctors along the way because she needed constant um, platelet transfusions, blood
Okay.
transfusions. So, but we made it work. And then she said, "Okay, now I want to go to Ohio and meet my cousins or
Oh,
see my cousins
yeah.
because that's where I'm from." So we went to Ohio, and we had she got to hang out with her cousins, and we had just some really, really wonderful memories that we made.
Mhm.
And she got really sick when we were in Ohio and
Mm.
ended up in the hospital. And she said, Mom, I don't want to die here.
Mm.
This is a hard conversation, but I've told this story, so hopefully it lands okay. But
Yeah.
she said, Mom, I don't want to die here. I want to
Mm.
go home. I want to be in California. So the hospital didn't want to release her,
Mm.
and she couldn't fly on a commercial flight because she needed oxygen. And so they said, there's nothing you can do. Well, we had a wonderful home health nurse who connected with um, one of the local businesses who had a
Mhm.
private jet, and they flew us home.
Oh my
And
gosh.
because we could,
Wow.
she came with us, and
Mm.
so we got her home,
Mhm.
and it was amazing the way that things happened.
Mhm.
So I'm telling that story because this is how I made it through.
Mhm.
It was these connections. It
Yeah.
was things that I couldn't have planned. I didn't orchestrate
Mhm.
that just were able to happen. And it made me feel like we are all supported in our lives in
Mhm.
some way or another, even if we don't see it.
Yeah.
So we got home, and she had one more request. She wanted to go swimming
Mhm.
one more time, which was a big process because we had to unhook her. It had to be in a private pool. We couldn't take her to the ocean. And so I called my friend who had a pool and asked if we could come over. And she said, the pool's drained right now. We had to have
Oh.
a repair, but it'll be back up on Monday. And this was like on Friday.
Mhm.
So I said, okay. We'll wait till Monday. Nikki, hang on.
Mhm.
And she ended up passing away that weekend.
Oh.
But then there's a whole nother story about how I think she did get her last swim, but
Okay.
that's a whole nother,
Okay.
I could talk about that forever. So
Oh.
then after my husband and daughter passed,
Mhm.
again, Nikki died in August. So
Okay.
Carrie died in April and Nikki in August.
Oh my goodness.
And I had two young boys still.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
5 and 7. And it was, okay, what are we going to do now?
Mhm.
And we had been wanting to move from Southern California for quite some time. And every time we went to leave, something happened that kept us there. And
Okay.
the most recent was when my husband was in treatment, we were going to move to Northern California. We had found an oncologist up there. We had found a place to live. We were all set to go. We were just waiting for the kids to finish the school year. And then that's when Nikki was diagnosed. Well,
Oh,
the place that we were going to move to was 3 hours from San Francisco's Children's Hospital. So it
okay.
was like, no, we can't do that. So
Yeah.
we stayed. So it was like, okay, I wanted to move. Plus, I knew if I stayed in Southern California, I would have to go back to work probably
Mhm.
immediately, and I
Yeah.
was in no condition to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my brother had just moved to Spokane, and
Okay.
he said, "You will love it here. Come up." So I said, okay. So I flew up for the weekend and I looked around, and this town literally called my name.
Mm.
So he introduced me to a realtor. Her name was Marianne.
Okay.
And the weekend that I was coming up, she said, I'm going to be out of town, but I'll have you, meet with my colleague. His name was Kerry, which was my husband's
Oh
name,
my gosh.
spelled the same way with a K.
Wow.
And it was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then we're driving around and we're on Mullen Boulevard. That's my maiden name. And then
Okay.
I saw Marianne's restaurant and I was like, okay, this is where I need to move
Yeah.
to. So packed,
It literally
packed
was
up.
calling your name.
Yes, it was. It just, you know how you get those feelings where you just know this is the right thing to
Yeah.
do, even though all of the conventional wisdom said, don't do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Conventional wisdom says don't make any major decisions in that first year.
Yeah.
But my feeling was our life had been such upheaval for many years.
Mhm.
We had a little bit of a respite in there, but for the most part, it had been just and I thought, if I knew we were leaving Southern California,
Mhm.
do I want to get everything settled down and then disrupt again? Or should we just go now? And
Yeah.
for us, it was the right decision to go then.
Mhm.
So we moved here and things were going great. I decided I was going to become a writer.
Okay.
Um, and I started taking some journalism classes and philosophy because I love philosophy and
Mhm.
wrestling with the bigger questions of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Michael was diagnosed with a brain tumor 3 years after we got here.
Oh,
And to say that was
yeah.
devastating, it's a major understatement.
Mhm.
But it made me recognize that nothing immunizes you against future tragedies.
Mhm.
Even no matter what your past is like, no matter what has happened, you're still not immunized. And
Mhm.
so I had to figure out a way to, how do you live with that knowledge
Yeah.
that, you know, we can intellectualize and say, well, this isn't going to happen to us. These
Yeah.
things happen to other people. And then when it happens to you, and there are so many emotions and so many feelings and so many thoughts of, why is this happening to
Mhm.
me?
Mhm.
And yet it's happening all the time
Mhm.
to a vast number of people.
Mhm.
And so coming to terms with life doesn't single us out, life just happens.
Mhm.
And so he went through 2 years of treatment, and I was convinced that he would survive because I was still living in that, oh, this can't happen again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he didn't. He passed away at the age of 12.
Oh,
And at that time, I thought, okay, I still had Matthew, my youngest
mhm.
son. And it's like, okay, we still are in this world and we
Yeah.
still need to live our lives. And how do we want to live our lives? So I thought I can't go backwards. So I enrolled at Gonzaga and I thought, okay, I'm going to go back into journalism. I'm going to keep pursuing that. And Matthew was doing okay in school.
Mhm.
He was in a wonderful supportive school.
Mm.
And
It makes a huge
so
difference.
it does,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
because some environments are better
Yeah.
than others.
Yeah.
And he was in a very, very loving environment. And so that helped. But as I started to write about campus life and as I started to be on the newspaper, it was like, I don't care. I can't,
Yeah.
I can't do this. I need to wrestle with some big questions.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I was still taking philosophy classes,
Mhm.
but I really sunk myself into philosophy and religion and spirituality, and really started to explore those bigger questions of
Mhm.
why are we here at all? And not only why am I suffering, but why does suffering exist?
Mhm.
And what do we do with that as being a part of the human condition? And so I ended up coming out of there with a degree in pastoral counseling, which,
Okay.
surprise, it was like that's totally not me, but it was those were the classes I was taking, right?
Mhm.
And because I went to my advisor and I said, "Here's what I've been taking. Now tell me how to fit these into
Yeah. Make a degree
something."
out of them.
Yes, yes, give me something here.
Yeah.
And I said, now give me something that's useful. And so he said, well, take this, and this, and you can be an come out with HR,
Mhm.
HR management, or I don't remember the exact designation, but um, so that's what I did. And then um, when Nikki was going through treatments in Southern California,
Mhm.
we did not have a peer-to-peer group.
Okay.
But when Michael was diagnosed, there was a group here in Spokane, and they were called Candlelighters.
Okay.
And it was a peer-to-peer group.
Mhm.
I absolutely attribute that group with me sitting here today, being able to
Mm.
speak,
Wow.
because I'm such a believer in peer-to-peer
Yeah.
group. So that organization was all volunteer run.
Okay.
And I looked at the history of it, and it had gone up and down over the years, depending on the strength of the volunteers. You get
Okay.
a great group of volunteers that come
Yeah.
in, they build the organization, and it's time for them to move on. And the new group comes in and basically starts from scratch.
Yeah.
So they had been around since the late 70s,
Okay.
and no one knew about them unless you had a child with cancer or you
Oh,
worked in
wow.
Pete.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to make this a professional organization. We're going to take this organization, and that became my
Oh,
work.
okay.
I had to. Um, one of the books that really informed my life is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning,
Okay.
and um, so what I needed to do was get outside of myself and figure out, okay, what can I do to help others?
Mhm.
And it was to help take Candlelighters, make sure that it exists, um, as long as there's kids that with cancer that need it.
Mhm.
And they've gone through a couple of name changes over the years. We changed in 2010 to American Childhood Cancer Organization in the Northwest. And then most recently, and I think you had Leslie on, it's the
Yeah.
Childhood Cancer
Oh,
Coalition.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
so that's their beginnings, was Candlelighters.
Okay.
And I love that organization. They do
Mhm.
they're so important to families. And honestly, when I think about Michael, and just going to the Christmas party the
Mhm.
first year he was
Mhm.
diagnosed, it was a place where I could bring my boys. I didn't have to plan anything. I didn't have to think about anything. I could just show up and let them have a good time, because I
Mhm.
was in no condition to really be able, I mean, you do the Christmas presents and all of that, but I didn't have the bandwidth to
Yeah.
be able to provide those kind of things at that time. And so just something as simple as that.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's that peer-to-peer group that really, really was instrumental.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean, um, we've come a long way,
Mhm.
when I think back to those early days, um, there were times when I wasn't sure how I was going to make it through. I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to help Matthew,
Yeah.
because I mean, I think of us being in the same car. We're on the same journey, but
Mhm.
we're sitting in different seats.
Yeah.
And for me, it was my husband and my two children. For him, it was his father and his
Yeah.
sibling.
Yeah.
And so he's got this completely different perspective,
Mhm.
and yet we experienced the same kind of things.
Yeah.
And I think of that too with other families. You know, when I was with I don't know what to call it now, Child Cancer Coalition, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it was you know, you work with people who come from all different backgrounds, all different places, and everyone has to find their own way.
Mhm.
But we can be that support to kind of say, you know, you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
So after about 10 years, I think I did that. Um, I decided that I needed to shift. It was time for me to do something different.
Yeah.
And um, I briefly went to a national organization, but that was a grant funded position,
Okay.
and the funding didn't come through.
Sure.
So I left that, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And a friend of mine was on the board of Elevations
Okay.
and asked me if I would come and just kind of help and kind of give them some tips. So I started, and I had some time, and
Yeah.
so I said, okay. And then I'm still there, but
Yeah.
it didn't start out that way. It was started out as, oh yeah, let me come
I'll
and
help.
kind of help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm running the whole thing.
Well, no, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But so I've so right now in my life, I started a Facebook page called Dear Bereaved Parent.
Okay.
And I started it as just, I wanted to write love notes to,
Mm.
from one bereaved parent to another,
Mhm.
just solidarity. And it was funny because I was on an airplane, and I'm in a lot of bereaved parent groups online.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I feel like it's relevant, I'm very far out. And
Mhm.
it's so different in those early years. And if I feel like I try to contribute as much as I can.
Mhm.
But there's a theme that kind of goes through those groups that nothing is ever going to change. It's never going to get any better.
Mm.
And how am I ever going to live with this pain for the rest of my life?
Mhm.
And I was actually looking out the window of the airplane, and I thought, it doesn't have to be like that.
Mhm.
It doesn't, that if I would have thought that those first years, that pain I was feeling would never dissipate, I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
where I would be.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know, I'm just going to start, and I started writing them on the plane, just kind of like, here, 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 here. And
Yeah.
so I just threw them out on Facebook, and I don't really push it. But it's, they're, they're just, yeah, this is awful. It's
Yeah.
horrible. It's
Yeah.
a terrible, terrible thing, but it's not always going to feel the same.
Yeah.
And you're always going to feel that loss. You're always going to feel that grief, but it's not going to be a constant like it is in the beginning.
Mhm.
And I've come to a place, again, this has taken many, many years. I've
Yeah.
come to a place of where I can appreciate life for what it is,
Mhm.
not what I thought it should have been.
Mm.
And I can appreciate and touch joy when I never thought I would be able to do that again.
Mhm.
And so it was my small way of just kind of saying, hey, and I haven't posted there for a while because what I did was I took them and put them into a journal. And
Okay.
I wrote a journal, Dear Bereaved Parent Journal. And um, I think I'll go back to it, but
Mhm.
for now, my work takes a lot of time and
Yeah, I
energy.
bet. Yeah.
And I started a website, and again, I haven't posted there for a while, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like, okay, get back on this stuff.
Yeah.
But you
But
know,
you're
I
busy.
just, yeah, I did go through, you know, I've worked with a lot of bereaved parents. A friend of mine, who we got connected through a grief support group, and she and I have similar stories.
Mhm.
And so we just connected immediately. And we've co-facilitated some groups together.
Okay.
But I thought, I don't have a degree. I'm not a counselor.
Hmm.
I come from a place of the experiential place.
Yeah.
So we are, it's peer to peer. I did go through David Kessler's grief educator course.
Okay.
So that was very validating as I went through that course, going, oh yeah, I already know that. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that resonates. Okay, you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was really good. So that's what I'm doing now, and just trying to figure out how can I take my experience and help others with it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
a- and so it sounds like there's been several things that have kind of helped you along your healing journey, which is never ending. Like
Right.
it's not like there's a end point for, oh, once I get here, then I'm completely healed. Um, but there's been a lot, it sounds like, that has gone into helping you heal from each loss each time. Is there a
Right.
few things that stood out for you that you could share with our listeners that might encourage them or um, just help them feel seen? Because even if our listeners haven't experienced loss from cancer, loss can happen in so many ways, and we have
Yes.
to heal, and we have to move through that grief as it comes, in these, like, I almost want to say waves, that I like how you said, like, it may not feel so intense every single time, but we still have these waves of grief that come up. So yeah, I would love to hear kind of about that part of it, the healing side of it for you.
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things is number one, don't try to rush it.
Hmm.
And because we have friends and family that love us, or even colleagues that love us and don't want to see us sad, and they all question us, why aren't you over that yet? And put
Mm.
on realistic expectations on our timeline. And
Hmm.
so I would say, trust yourself, trust your process.
Hmm.
It takes time. The DSM came out, was it last year or so, and put a time limit on prolonged grief.
Mm.
So then it becomes something diagnosable
Mm.
after a year. Well, when you lose a child, that first year is sometimes, the second year is sometimes harder than the first year.
Yeah.
And I've heard that echoed many times.
Hmm.
And so, and I get why they did it, because they want to be able to have have parents have access to counseling and have it
Sure.
covered by insurance.
Sure.
But then we'll get into a whole insurance thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's, yeah, I won't go there, because
Yeah. Yeah.
they dictate too much of our lives. So I would say, trust yourself, trust your
Yeah.
process. And that's not always easy to do. And don't be afraid to set boundaries around your
Yeah.
time. People will want you to do things you may not be ready for. There was a great quote by I heard it on a podcast where it was, sometimes we have to go out in the world before our hearts are ready to do it. And
Mm.
sometimes you do have to show up out in the world before you're quite ready. You
Yeah.
have other children, you have
Yeah.
jobs, you have
Yeah.
these things that have to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So give yourself some grace.
Hmm.
And I can remember walking through a grocery store and walking past my son's favorite food and bursting into tears in the middle of the grocery
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
And instinctively you're embarrassed, and it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta go. Don't
Yeah.
be embarrassed.
Yeah.
This is life. And I think that um, you just, I don't know how else to say it except for give yourself that
Yeah.
grace. Allow yourself the time that you need, because it takes time to process through all of this.
Hmm.
But don't try to rush it either. Don't. I remember there was a day when I woke up and I thought, I can't keep feeling this way
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
This is just so awful. And and it was, how am I going to keep going when I'm bleeding on the inside and nobody can see it because
Yeah.
it's been a year and a half or
Yeah.
it's been 2 years and they don't understand. So that's where that peer-to-peer support, I think, is so crucial,
Hmm.
because you will find that it's not unusual.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty much the norm,
Yeah.
that it's going to take time. And I've known people who have shoved those feelings aside,
Mhm.
and 20 years later, they're still feeling those
Oof.
same things. And
Yeah.
I know others who have dug in and done some deep work, because grief can also bring up past traumas.
Yeah.
And and so knowing when you need counseling, understanding that that doesn't mean there's something wrong in your process, just that you need that individual one-to-one counseling.
Yeah.
That helped me a lot, because your life is not just specific incidents.
Yeah.
It's all connected, right? You know it,
Hmm.
right? And so
Hmm.
um it's so I would say the other thing that really helped me is our books. I'm one of those people that believe that books find us rather than
Yeah.
we find the books.
Yeah.
And I paid attention to that
Yeah.
when a book gets mentioned and then I hear it again, or then I run across it in a bookstore, or I'm in a bookstore and I'm just drawn to a certain
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer, which is why I'm going to write a book. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I finally decided I'm going to write my memoir.
Oh, I
And
love that.
yeah.
That's
So,
amazing.
although I would
Yeah.
say, trust yourself and seek support
Yeah.
peer to peer and with a grief counselor
Yeah.
if it's warranted, and um, read as much as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so how did, like, at what point did you realize, okay, I need counseling. I need to see a therapist. I can no longer do this on my own.
Well, when I first moved to Spokane, um, we had been through so much in the last couple of years.
Hmm.
And I also firmly believe that I have blind spots,
Hmm.
and I wanted to make sure my children got what they needed.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take them to get them some children's grief um,
Okay.
therapy.
Okay.
And because I thought, okay, they need to be able to talk to
Yeah.
someone that I may not be able to see.
Hmm.
And so it was through, I believe it was through hospice. So this
Okay.
was a while ago. And they had a group for kids, and then they also had a group for parents.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, if I'm going to send my kids, I need to do it
Yeah.
myself
Lead by
too.
example.
Yeah, but it wasn't one to one. It was group. It was with
Okay.
other parents, but they weren't necessarily cancer parents.
Yeah.
And so that was really good, and I'm really glad I took my boys there.
Hmm.
Michael dealt with a lot of anger issues. He was
Mm.
really angry. Matthew was again, he was my child that came out, and life's a party, and
Hmm. Yeah.
it's all gonna be okay. We would go into the grocery store, and Matthew would look at the checker and go, "Hey, my mom, my dad and my sister died." And Michael would be going, "Oh
Oh
God,"
my
and
God.
just wanting to crawl underneath the,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the poor checker standing there
Like,
looking
what
at
do
me
I
like,
say?
so,
Oh.
so we did that early on. And then, after, after a while, um, after Michael passed, and I think I went and saw no, it was after Michael passed. So, I never wanted to have Matthew live in complete fear that
Hmm.
he's going to get cancer.
Hmm.
He even said at one time, "Well, let's see, Nikki died at 9, Michael was 12, so I'll be 15 when I die."
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, "Oh, no,
Oh,
no, no,
yeah.
honey, no. That's not going to be the way it works."
Hmm.
And so I thought, okay, we need to work through
Hmm.
these kind of issues. But he had a scare. We had a medical scare with
Oh
him,
my gosh.
and he had a lump And so it was kind of, he was a teenager at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
we had to go and figure out what was going on. And it, of course, everything happens around holidays, right?
Yeah.
And so it was right before Christmas. And we got him in and got, his primary care doctor would say, well, it's probably nothing. It's probably okay.
Mm-hmm.
But given your family history, we should probably check it out. And so we went and had a scan done, and the radiologist said, well, it looks like it's okay, but given your family history, the
Oh,
best way to know is a needle biopsy.
yeah.
It's like 98% sure it's nothing. And so I looked at my son and I said, well, what do you think? And he said, I'm good with 98%. And I said, well, I'm not. Are you
Yeah.
okay to go through a needle biopsy? And he said, yes,
Oh,
luckily.
yeah.
Because he was a teenager and I didn't want
Yeah.
to force him.
Yeah.
So we did that and it was benign. It was fine.
Okay.
So he was okay. But after that, it took a long time because of getting the lab reports, getting in
Yeah.
the doctors and the holidays, and then trying to get through the holidays because there are all those demands
Yeah.
around, Christmas, and
Yeah.
Santa still needed to come and all that kind of stuff. Well, he was
Yeah.
older, he was
Yeah.
beyond, but you know what I mean. It's
Mm-hmm.
so, and then after Christmas, I collapsed.
Yeah.
I couldn't get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like, and I realized how much fear I had been
Yeah.
holding and trying, because you still have to carry that and you
Yep.
still have to go through those motions. And so I thought, okay, I need to work this out.
Yeah.
And so I started counseling. And I saw this gal for about a year and she was amazing. And it was so healing for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed that. I needed
Yeah.
to be able to figure out how to live with this fear, this
Yeah.
uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that I was not immune from future
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
And even if I would mentally tell myself, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to, it was still buried under there. It was
Yeah.
still, and that became very apparent as we went through that hospital scare,
Mm-hmm.
and how deeply buried it was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So that got me into counseling the first time. And so,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What is your healing journey look like now?
So now I'm revisiting, I'm not sure that I'm wrestling with the word healing.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and I've been wrestling with it only, I would say, in the last 6 months,
Okay.
because there's a part of me that feels like this is life.
Sure.
And life is what it is. And we feel like it's the expectations. Okay, so maybe this is what I'm healing from. I'm healing from the expectations of what I was taught life is,
Yeah.
because we're taught
Yep.
oh,
It'll be.
fantasies,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I grew up watching, those sitcoms and the beautiful, perfect families,
Mm-hmm.
and we're told that children don't die before their
Right.
parents. Well,
Yeah.
that's not true.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
All the
We're
time.
taught that young parents are here for their kids when they grow up.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always the case.
Yeah.
And it's everyone has their own life journey,
Mm-hmm.
and accepting that I don't know what life is supposed to be. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing I know is what life is. So for me, that's a healing process.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it's but as far as the grief, I don't think it's an illness. I
Yeah.
think it's a human emotion that we all
Yeah.
go through, just like laughter and joy, right?
Yeah.
So how do we not let one part of life dominate every part of life?
Yeah.
It all informs us.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes together and we express it in different ways at different times. And so to me, it's more of a growth process.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like when Nikki and Carrie passed, I had I was raised in a certain religion,
Okay.
and the container of that religion could not hold my experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to learn a new way to understand spirituality and our connectedness
Yeah.
and life. And I fashioned together a beautiful system that I was, yeah, things happen for a reason and blah, 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 and all that. And then when Michael got sick, that all crumbled
Yeah.
and
It
fell.
fell apart.
And
Hmm.
when he passed away, I I went to the opposite. Nothing makes sense.
Hmm.
Nothing is connected. And so that was a deeper dive into the dark night of the soul,
Hmm.
into that untethered place
Hmm.
where you are in this lonely, lonely place. And it took me a long time to work through that, but I didn't shy away from it. I
Yeah.
didn't avoid those questions
Hmm.
because they were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I allowed myself to go there. Luckily, I had support around me to be able to
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm.
And yeah, because it can be hard to do that on your own.
Yeah.
But I needed to explore that. And now I can come to this place of I know we're all connected.
Hmm.
I know there is something greater than this. I know these things. Can I tell you what that is? No, you have to
Yeah.
find your own way. You have to find it yourself. What I can tell you is there is a way through it. There is
Hmm.
a way to do this. And you you need to be able to um, be open to exploration.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're told things and it shuts us down.
Hmm.
Well, this just happened and you need to move on.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, that's easier said than done.
Hmm.
I need to know how to move on.
Yeah.
And so finding those pathways and finding support, and it's out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people willing to help.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I feel like something resonated with me, which is instead of saying, and so correct me if I'm missing this, but what I'm hearing from you is instead of saying we're healing from this, the loss that led to grief, we're actually growing from
Yes.
processing this grief because grief is okay. Feelings are okay. And we don't need to heal our grief. We should grow from our grief. Is
We
that
can, yes, we
can
can
grow?
grow.
We
You know,
can grow. Yeah, that's good.
there's there's post-traumatic stress and then there's post-traumatic growth,
Yeah.
which is I don't know a lot about it. I just heard the term before. And I think that's true.
Hmm.
And as bereaved parents, and that's one of the things that um, there is so much power in grief. It
Hmm.
is such a strong, powerful emotion and
Hmm.
feeling and process. And what do we do with that power? What do
Yeah.
we do with that energy? It's a strong energy, and we can grow from it, or and that was a decision I consciously made. Do I want to live the rest of my life in sorrow and sadness and bitterness because my life
Yeah.
didn't turn out the way I had wished it would,
Yeah.
or the way my neighbors did? And you see, these healthy
Mhm.
young kids running around. Or what really would get me is when you would see parents who didn't appreciate their
Yeah.
children
Yeah.
and didn't treat them well.
Right.
And you would try to or I would try to reconcile what what
Hmm.
what what is this?
Hmm.
And I think that energy of grief can spur us to future growth. I see the world completely different than I did before. I'm
Hmm.
not a different person. I'm the same person,
Yeah.
but my attitudes, my experiences, my tolerance for others, my um, understanding of um, what is it that I want to do with the time I have here
Yeah.
has changed
Yeah.
much. So.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Um, so what about, I know you've given some good suggestions and some mm, I mean, I'm going to ask for resources. I feel like you've given some like resources like big umbrella, but specifically, what would be maybe three resources that you would recommend to families who are experiencing that grief from whatever it is, the loss of a child or the loss of a parent or even the loss of a marriage. Like there's so many things that are big losses that we grieve and feel so heavy. So what would be three like specific resources you would recommend?
So when you talk about that big umbrella of loss and grief, immediately what comes to mind are the fires that we had last year,
Oh
and
yeah.
so many people who lost so
Yeah.
much.
Yep.
And that is, there's a grieving there.
Yeah.
And so I would think that for me, a specific resource, this isn't specific, so sorry.
That's okay.
But but find some way that you can be active and give something back.
Okay.
Because if you can step out of your own grief and your own loss, so if you're a widow or a widower, there are groups that help those people in that. Or
Okay.
if you, or just go and give back time to any nonprofit that needs volunteers.
Yeah.
That's going to give you something to be able to hold on to. It gives you something to do, and it takes you back into the process of living.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing. The other thing is, for children who are grieving, there's a new resource in Spokane called Lion's Heart,
Okay.
and it's a resource for children
Okay.
who are grieving. And another resource might be, seek out peer groups.
Yeah.
There's an online resource. So I went through David Kessler's Grief Educator course, and
Okay.
he has an online resource called Tender Hearts.
Okay.
And he's got different groups for parents, for spouses, for he has a whole breakdown
Okay.
of those kind of things. So if you just look him up,
Yep.
there's lots of resources
I
there.
will I will link all of that in the show notes so that people are, as they're
Yeah.
listening, they don't have to be writing this down. They can just come and find the links and I'll make sure that we direct them to those great resources. So
Yeah.
well, before we end our time, I am hoping you can just briefly talk about elevations. I know that that is not why we came here, which is why I waited till the end. But I was sharing with you before we started recording that I actually just recently learned about elevations, and it's really cool. And I'm excited to hopefully someday be able to be a part of that. I'm working that way. But if you could maybe just, because I think that a lot of our listeners probably could benefit from elevations and may not know about it. So if you could just give us a little snapshot of what it is and how people can find out more about it.
Yeah, so it's Elevation's a Children's Therapy Resource Foundation.
Okay.
And it was founded because too many children who were receiving or who could benefit from therapy services were
Hmm.
falling through the cracks because their parents couldn't afford the copays and deductibles and the out-of-pocket expenses.
Yeah.
So they were either rationing care by skipping certain
Yeah.
treatments or going deeper into debt, which then puts them into a whole different stressful
Hmm.
financial situation. So Elevations was founded so children have to be receiving services,
Okay.
but we can help families pay copays. So some of the kids, so occupational speech, physical therapy,
Hmm.
some kids get all of those. Some of
Yeah.
them get multiple therapies a week, and a $30 or $40
Yeah.
copay
For
2 or 3
each one of
times
those.
a week
Mhm.
was becoming just too much. So they were, do I skip occupational therapy or
Yeah.
speech therapy this week?
Yeah.
And then deductibles have been rising over the years.
Yes.
So they can be as much as $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And the in each insurance company dictates how many services can
Hmm.
be the child can get.
Hmm.
So if your insurance company only allows 40 visits a year and your child needs 80,
Hmm.
those by the time you hit your deductible, you're out of visits and it all becomes out of pocket.
Yeah.
So families were just that financial stress that happens in a family.
Yep.
So we say that we want to support the whole family. So
Yeah.
we're very simple, a very targeted mission. We will help families pay those out-of-pocket costs. And there are services that are not covered by insurance
Yeah.
that are very beneficial. So
Mhm.
we can help families with that. Our criteria is they have to be receiving services. They need to be between the ages of birth and 18.
Okay.
And it has to be a service by a licensed therapist.
Okay.
So we've done things like music therapy,
Mhm.
where a music therapist, which insurance doesn't always cover.
Mhm. Yeah.
And um, so we just want to make sure the kids it's going to affect our whole community, because if these
Yeah.
kids don't get what they need when they're young, and we have a very simple process, elevationspokane.org.
Okay.
The application, the families can fill out the applications. We do ask providers truly partner with us, and they do fill out a provider agreement.
Okay.
So, and that's on our website as well.
Okay.
So if they're not already, we list all of our partner clinics. So if a child's receiving services by a licensed therapist somewhere else, they can
The
take that
provider can.
they can take that to their provider and
Cool.
work with that. The
Yeah.
application, we try to make it as low barrier as possible. It's
Mhm.
very simple. There's a piece for the parents to fill out, and then there's a part for the therapist,
Okay.
their therapist to offer that support.
Okay.
And and we do 3 funding cycles a year.
Okay.
I think our next one is the applications are due at the end of March, and funding, we don't pay past bills.
Okay.
So the funding will begin May 1st for this next grant cycle, but all of the dates are listed on the website.
Okay.
And then there's another one in September, and then August is the deadline, I believe. And then there's a December deadline for grants starting January 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So,
I will put all of that information on the show notes too, because I am so excited that I just had no idea that you were connected to Elevation. So I was like, we have to talk about this because it's
yes, of course we
really
do.
cool. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Truly think that you sharing your story, sharing your journey, sharing the ups and the downs and how you are here right now, um, is helping others on their journey. And so from the bottom of my heart, I really truly appreciate you coming on and sharing that, because we all have stuff that we're grieving, and nobody's is worse or easier or better or whatever. We all have it. And so to be able to hear you come on out, not on the other side, but like come through it, and you're still doing it, is just such an inspiration. So
Oh, well, thank you for that. And you're right. We all have our own thing,
yeah,
and we're all doing it,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, especially now. I mean, the world is
I
like
know.
this great. It's a crazy place.
It's a whole that I know, right? Like,
We didn't
wow.
even go there.
I know. Maybe another time.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I appreciate you being on, and enjoy this rainy/snowy day.
Well, thank you. Yes. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.